Disclaimer: there is no game audio for the G36 portion of this video. So we're going to have a photo of G36 on the left and a photo of the loadout on the right. You can determine how close it is for yourself, but I do think I got it pretty accurately for the most part. Now we're going to need to be talking about like what is the upsides or the downsides both of the gun and of the attachments. And since this is going to be the first one in the video featuring 3 different types of guns, this one's probably going to be the longest, which is also why I talked about how there's no game audio. That was a complete editing mistake and I don't know how to fix that without re-recording the gameplay, and I'm not going to do that. So first, let's talk about the strengths of the Holger 26, or if you just want to call it by its real life name, the G36. It's the one, I think it's the slowest killing LMG in the game, but it's also the most lightweight. So it's tied for the fastest aim down sight speed and should have the highest base mobility out of all the LMGs, at the cost of course, being the slowest killing LMG. It starts off with a 100-round magazine, which is tied for the best in the entire category, but once again, that's also brought down by its lack of damage overall. So if you're going to use the Holger 26/G36 to shoot down vehicles using FMJ, it's not going to kill them nearly as fast as using a Bruin, which also comes with a 100-round magazine, and you can throw FMJ on it. But that's not what we're here to talk about. The first attachment on this gun is the flash guard. Now, if you take a look at the gameplay here, when I'm shooting while aiming down sights or hip firing, it's mostly just smoke, and there's not much flash. You see, the flash guard was very useful in other Call of Duty games because the flash was very much exaggerated and non-realistic. But in this game, most of the muzzle flash, if you want to include the entire effect, is actually just the smoke, just the gas leaving the barrel. So it's not really muzzle flash. Muzzle flash is very reduced in this game. It's not even that much of an issue to pay attention to. So the flash guard, while it does serve a nice benefit, reducing your muzzle flash, take a shot every single time I say one of those words, you're probably going to get alcohol poisoning. It's not actually that useful. It's because they have already nerfed muzzle flash in this game. Now, it does come with a major downside, which is probably the reason nobody actually uses flash guards in comparison to suppressors. It lowers your bullet velocity. And why would you lower your bullet velocity to get rid of muzzle flash when you can put on a monolithic suppressor, increase your bullet velocity, increase your damage range, and get rid of muzzle flash? Same thing goes for the tactical suppressor. The lightweight suppressor kind of sucks though. I do think the lightweight suppressor actually makes it even worse than reduced bullet velocity because it actually just cuts your damage range by 25%. Oh yeah, speaking of this aerial gameplay here, yeah, if I shot down all these things with a rocket, I would end up getting a legendary calling card. I kind of like the way it looked, so I'll be using that throughout the gameplay. Now, the second one we're going to be talking about here is an attachment unique to the Holger, which is the integrated sight you can see I'm using. So it's not like a sight on a rail, it's sort of built into the rail. It's actually a real sight. It's pretty cool in real life. It's a hybrid sight, meaning there's enhanced magnification, there's 1x magnification, and actually in, I think, MG36's art, it's the hybrid, but unfortunately the hybrid isn't in the game. You only get the 1x optic in Modern Warfare. So that's for how good this optic is. I'm actually not that much of a fan. So because it's integrated, you see a lot of the gun when you're aiming down sights, and that really takes up your peripheral vision. However, I will say one thing, and that I really like the actual dot itself. It's just a yellow plus sign. It looks very nice, actually. And speaking of the yellow plus sign, it is pretty high contrast in comparison to the rest of the optics in the game, unless you're running like red or green optics, which are the majority of them, yes. But it's not like where if you run the blue optic, you know, the blue dot you unlock if you do all the challenges for the optics. Yeah, that one blends in with a lot of the maps. I don't like it that much, even though it's low profile. You could definitely do better than the integral sight. However, it's not terrible. When you're aiming out sight and you look inside the optic, so the area where the glass, you can see through the glass, well, it's actually not that much of an issue. You do have a bit of peripheral vision inside of the optic. It's mainly the outside of the optic that covers a decent amount of your screen, but I actually have no issues running the integral sight on this gun. So the next thing we're going to be talking about here is the 30-round magazine, which is actually the unique attachment for this gun. So you're wondering why it's unique. Well, most of the LMGs, except for the Bruin, have attachments that increase ammo capacity, but not ones that decrease ammo capacity. So the reason this is what really makes the Holger, the G36, have its niche inside of this game. So The 30 round magazine essentially converts the G36 or the MG36 into a G36. And I think it increases your sprint out time. It decreases your aim down sight time. I think it increases your movement speed as well. And essentially, it's a full conversion of the movement stats for this gun to convert it more to an assault rifle style level, heavily reducing it from when it was an LMG with the 100 round magazine. Essentially, if you know what the HK433 is, the Kilo 141, and you know there's a 100 round drum mag on there, this is the inverse. Rather than turning your gun into an LMG, this turns your gun into an assault rifle. Turns your assault rifle into an LMG, the Kilo. This one turns the G36 from an LMG to an assault rifle. So it's a very recommended attachment if you're a rusher because, well, I mean, it literally makes your gun faster in every way. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't use it. Plus, you're already giving up some of your long-range capability by using a flash guard, which reduces your bullet velocity. And that's a pretty nice double kill on the people far over there. So I'm still good at the game, hopefully. So that's mainly it for the 30 round magazine. It's more or less just an AR conversion. Next up, this is going to help even more with turning into an assault rifle. That would be the stippled grip tape. Now, there's a little known fact. Actually, no, sorry, it's not a little known fact. Most people don't actually know it, but most people suspect it. The stippled grip tape's effects increase the heavier your weapon is. So, for example, the stippled grip tape really doesn't do much on SMGs. It's like 13 milliseconds faster sprint out time, and it's like 6-7 milliseconds for aim down sight time. It's a really minor effect, which really sucks. I mean, that's why you don't really see me run stippled grip tape unless I have nothing else to put on the SMG, because it just doesn't offer much of an effect. It's still a positive effect, not really much of a downside except for aiming stability, but the effect is so reduced that I don't really consider it a top tier attachment on SMGs. For assault rifles, it's a small amount of aim down sight speed reduction, like double the SMGs, and minus 34 milliseconds off sprint out time, minus 71 milliseconds off super sprint out time. And those are the same values for the LMG, except for the aim down sight time. For the LMGs, rather than decreasing your aim down sight speed by like 13 or 14 milliseconds, for most of the LMGs, it's over 30 plus milliseconds faster when you put on a stippled grip tape. So if you really wanted to aim down sight fast and get some, like, get on target much faster, and like say you sprint out of a corner, you're going to get a huge benefit from the stippled grip tape. And if you want to pre-aim something, or if you were reacting to somebody entering your view, it's really good for, you know, aiming down sight faster. It doesn't have as much of a downside as like the aim down sight stocks. I think those ruin your aiming stability even more. Plus it comes with the extra benefit of sprint out time. And so overall, I would heavily recommend running every single LMG in the game with stippled grip tape because there's very little downside. I mean, yeah, sure, a lot of people might not use it in Warzone, but also in Warzone, you're probably using a tac laser. And, you know, that kind of gets rid of the main downside of the stippled grip tape, which is the aiming stability. And so, okay, so now we're getting to the last attachment on the G36, would be the sleight of hand. Now, the G36 reloads extremely fast, by LMG standards, I mean. You have the 100 round magazine, and I think it's like a 4-second reload in comparison to the 8-9-second reloads of most LMGs in Modern Warfare. You just, essentially, it's a magazine reload. Drop the magazine, shove a new one in. It actually does increase by a little bit, I think, when you switch to the 30 round magazine. However, you can go even faster. And when you give it the sleight of hand, I mean, you've been seeing the gameplay. I reload pretty damn fast when using the sleight of hand attachment. So, of course, you would think, I run with FMJ on an LMG, but considering this is more or less an assault rifle, 30 rounds isn't going to do too much to any support kill streak. So I'm mostly going to be running it as a player killing weapon. And so if you're running with reduced magazines and you're trying to be fast, you're trying to rush, you know, stippled grip tape helps you rush. 30 round magazines help you rush. Flash guard doesn't even make your gun better at a distance. It in fact makes it worse. Pretty much every one of the attachments on the G36 in this game using this loadout encourages you to attack your opponent up close. And so sleight of hand allows you to, say you kill 1 or 2 people, your gun's almost empty. Well, sleight of hand is going to help you reload faster. That's kind of the whole point of the perk. So there's no downside to running sleight of hand except for using a perk slot. So overall, it's a highly recommended perk. it just decreases your reload speed, helps you get back in action faster. So there's pretty much no issue and no reason not to run it. So going over that, my total conclusion on the G36 loadout, it's pretty good. I like it. The only thing I would really replace here I would actually replace the flash guard with an aim down walking speed stock, or another aim down sight stock, because you want to get it even faster. You want to be strafing in, strafing out, aim down sight in, aim down sight out. Basically optimize it even further for rushing. Or if you want to reduce recoil, I would recommend removing the flash guard and throwing in a muzzle brake. But if that's not enough, remove the muzzle brake and put an angled foregrip. Because this gun doesn't really suffer from recoil control issues, it suffers from recoil stabilization issues. But overall, I would have no issue with someone running this setup. The only thing I wouldn't run on here is the flash guard, and that's because I don't think muzzle flash is that much of an issue in this game. And also, lowering your bullet velocity makes you worse at range. Before we move on to the G36C, let's not forget the G36 actually does have a mod 3. I'm going to show it on screen real quick. The reason there's not going to be any gameplay for it though is because the only real difference in the actual loadout in Modern Warfare would be that I swapped out the flash guard for a compensator. This is actually a pretty optimal build if you're trying to make this gun rushing. I would recommend using this, though I would replace the compensator with a muzzle brake, but pretty much anything that reduces recoil is pretty good in my book rather than something that reduces bullet velocity. The more astute among you may realize the G36 I'm using inside of the gameplay is not accurate to the one in G36C's normal skin, and that's because it's actually based on the one off her wedding. The one in her normal skin simply has this Spitfire barrel and a 30-round magazine. That's only 2 attachments and it's pretty lame, so I wanted to spice it up a little bit by having an optic and a foregrip. I didn't make this out of thin air, by the way. It's based on her wedding skin, which I'm going to go show a photo of right now. Ignore the lewd bits and just look at her gun. It's actually fairly well detailed, and I have to give credits to the artist for that one. Let's just talk about this gun real quick. It has a flash guard, and I've already talked to you about the flash guard lowering your bullet velocity. However, it gets even worse on the G36C because I'm running the Spitfire barrel, which is the shorter of the 2 barrels, and it decreases your bullet velocity and your damage range. So this gun is going to be terrible at range, mostly because it just has a really low bullet velocity. Not really low. There's certainly weapons that have lower bullet velocity, but it's certainly not good. It could be much better. Let's just don't use this gun at range, but it will rush pretty well. I will give you that. So because you're using the shorter barrel, you're going to be increasing your recoil. That's where the Ranger foregrip comes in and counteracts that. It's going to give you less recoil, though I would prefer recoil stabilization on this gun in particular. But less recoil in general is always a positive, and it's going to give you a higher aiming stability. Now, if you want to be optimal, I would have swapped this out for a Merc foregrip. Because the gun is centered around being able to aim up close, I would have increased the hip fire by using the Merc foregrip, but that's not what she had on her gun. Well, if you already know about the 30-round magazine, it's pretty much essential if you want to make a really good rushing G36. You can do it with a 100-round magazine, but I wouldn't recommend it. And the last thing we have on this gun would actually be the Core Combat Hollow Sight, which, is an EOTech. It's a pretty good optic in this game. It's a 1.5 times magnification. It's one of the most used optics for a reason, and it looks really cool. I have no issue with that. Since this gun is so similar to the last one, considering they're the same gun, let's just talk about what you're going to use this one for. You're definitely going to use this gun at closer ranges due to the significantly lowered bullet velocity. However, you can engage at longer distances. You can see that in the gameplay. This is because the Ranger foregrip decreases your recoil enough that as long as you're good with your controller, good with your mouse, you should be able to hit people. 30-round magazine, though, means you're going to have to be reloading often. You don't have sleight of hand on this loadout, unfortunately, so you're not going to be able to rush in and out of combat all that much in comparison. But overall, you have a clear sight picture due to your EOTech sight, you run fast due to your short barrel and your magazine size, and your foregrip reduces recoil. It's a decent SBR rushing setup. This isn't something I really talk about on this series that often, mostly because it's sort of up to chance on what maps you get, but I do change the guns I use depending on the maps. So if you look at it here, we're looking at a bit of Rust gameplay, and Rust and Rust, Shoot House, Shipment, the closer range maps, of course, would favor this gun. There's not really a gun that works in every situation. For example, the really long range Warzone guns, well, they're not really good at close range, and the majority of multiplayer is in much closer ranges than Warzone, so I really wouldn't use a dedicated Warzone loadout for multiplayer. Same thing goes for this. There's no way I would use this G36 in Warzone. But there's something to be said about gearing your weapons for the map. So even though I was saying this gun is good at rushing, you shouldn't use it at range, don't take it as never use this kit. There's a lot of the times where I make these loadouts and I make videos on them, but I do actually use them on my own time. Sometimes I like to kind of makes me sound like a pathetic loser weeaboo, but sometimes I want to cosplay as a character, not actually. I don't do the voice, I don't dress up. But I just want to use the gun they use in their game. I think it's pretty cool to do sometimes. So, I was talking about lower bullet velocity and everything, but you're perfectly serviceable using this gun, right? It's not terrible. You're not going to be, it's not like you're using the crossbow and lowering the crossbow velocity as much as possible, because that's actually awful. I would never recommend playing like that. That's horrible. This gun is nowhere close to being that bad. And if you want to use it, you can, and I would just tell you should use it on close range maps because you'll have to lead your bullets less, and you'll probably have a lot more fun time using the G36C.
Throwing flashbang.
We're moving on to the final weapon in this G36 triple video, which is the MG36, which is actually what the Holger 26 really is. 100 round double drum magazine, long barrel, integrated reflex sight. So this one is probably the least different than the base G36 because it doesn't ramp up the speed by running a 30 round magazine. Instead, the actual MG36, which I'm going to show the photo of her and of the loadout, is pretty good. It's very LMG-ish, is what I'm going to say. So here you see we're running the muzzle brake, which I have been telling pretty much everyone to run on this gun since even the G36 part earlier on in the video. And we have the integral reflex sight, which same thing as the original G36 in mod 3. Stippled grip tape because it's pretty much always good on LMGs. And we're running a full metal jacket. So let's go explain this in detail. Everyone knows what stippled grip tape does. I explained it in pretty much a lot of detail earlier in the G36. But there's two new attachments here. The FMJ and the muzzle brake. So let's start off with FMJ. So FMJ allows you to pierce more walls, more materials. Essentially, it allows you to wallbang more often. At least that's what it's supposed to do. One of the criticisms, even the exclusive Ace had about Modern Warfare was how inconsistent the bullet penetration mechanics in this game are. And I have to agree. If you're using FMJ, I wouldn't really use it to shoot through walls because you have no idea if those walls are even penetrable at all. I would actually instead use FMJ for a much bigger bonus, which is, I think it's like an extra 40% damage to score streaks. So if you see a VTOL, actually doesn't do extra damage to VTOL unless you shoot the turret. But like a chopper gunner, a sentry gun, a personal radar, a UAV, a counter UAV, pretty much every score streak except the VTOL takes extra damage as long as you can hit it with these rounds. And considering it's a 100 round LMG with a fast reload time, well, yeah, whatever you're shooting at is going to die pretty fast once you give increased damage due to FMJ. I don't actually shoot down any score streaks in the gameplay, and that's because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing this little rocket challenge. But FMJ, I run it on pretty much all my LMGs, because I'm going to run an LMG, I'm not going to use it just to kill people. I always run an LMG with an idea in my mind, and that idea is shutting down enemy score streaks the moment they come online. Like, enemy brings up a VTOL, I'm going to dedicate my next 3 lives to shooting the absolute hell out of it with my LMG until it dies. Right? Enemy UAV, gone. Personal radar, gone. Counter UAV, gone. That's really what I do with LMGs. They support my team more than just killing them. It's also removing the enemy's benefits off the stage. So overall, FMJ, a highly recommended attachment if you're going as a support player. And then here we go, the attachment I kept mentioning, the muzzle brake. Now you may be wondering, hey, what does the muzzle brake do that the compensator doesn't? Like that the foregrip doesn't? And you see, recoil control is essentially reducing the total magnitude, right? Say you drag your finger 2 meters. Recoil control means you now drag your finger 1 meter. That's a terrible example, but let's just use that. It essentially makes your recoil weaker. But what recoil control doesn't do, it changes how much your screen shakes. And that's what recoil stabilization does. Because recoil stabilization doesn't just reduce horizontal recoil, it reduces screen shake. And the G36 has a lot of screen shake. Or maybe screen shake's the wrong word. More like optic shake. If any of you fired guns in real life, you know your optic is really dependent on the way your eyes are looking at it at the moment. So there's a chance that if you're holding your optic like an idiot, the dot is not going to be pointing where your bullet will go. I think that's how that works anyway. And so you can see your optic wobble. Your optic can wobble off sight or off center from the screen. And that's what recoil stabilization helps to improve. It's why if you go back to my UMP45 video, I'm not very good at that gun, because a lot of the time the optic isn't really on the center of the screen, which is something you don't really see often in video games. So the G36, with all of its mobility advantages, all of its attachments, its main weakness is that if you really want to get good at aiming at long range, you're probably going to want to slap a angled foregrip, which heavily reduces your mobility and aiming down sight mobility, or you can throw on a muzzle brake, which it does the same job as an angled foregrip, but to a lesser extent. According to true game data, it may not do anything at all towards optic shake, but based on my testing, I feel that it's better. Of course, feeling isn't really as good as objective analysis of slow motion data, but let's not talk about that. So overall, if I were to give a rating to this MG36 setup, it's pretty good. However, there's one criticism. Remember how I said that the 30 round magazine increases your sprint out, increases your aim down sight speed, and also increases your movement speed? Well, you can really feel it when you're using the default 100 round double drum magazine. You feel much slower, you aim down sight much slower. So there is one improvement I would add to this gun, and that would be actually changing the stock. Whether or not you want an aim down sight speed stock or an aim walking movement speed stock is really up to choice, but either way, boosting the mobility of this gun is one of the top priorities you need, because you might as well use this LMG to its strengths. It doesn't kill as fast, it doesn't have as fast bullet velocity, it has more recoil than the rest, but you're definitely going to want to use it as a more rushing LMG.